You. Yeah, you there in front of the screen. Do you like fantasy games? How about turn-based strategy? How about getting absolutely shafted by RNG like the absolute XCOM slut that you are? Well, then have I got a game for you. Now, for those of you out of the know, the Battle for Wesnoth is a free, open-source turn-based strategy game with a hex-based board from the ancient year of 2003, over 2 decades ago. And yes, that was your backcracking. It's entirely free and volunteer run, though it might cost you a bit of your free time, and you can check out the credits page on their website, which is quite expansive. It was designed by David White, Rusty Russell, and Eric S. Raymond, who you might know from the Open Source Initiative. This game takes place on the fictional, or perhaps non-fictional, depending on your mental state, continent of Wesnoth, which resides in the realm/planet of Irdia. Although there is a campaign that takes place before it was named Wesnoth. Most of the official campaigns take place between 20 BW before Wesnoth and 858 YW years Wesnoth, though there is one that takes place an indeterminate amount of time into the future, and there's a whole alternate bit of history based on some of the most popular and polished campaigns, but we'll get to that. Most of the music takes inspiration from classical songs and remixes them. If you've played an Anno game, you'll notice a few familiar songs or samples. Again, all open source and community run. There are some add-ons that add even more music, though they usually need to be included into the campaigns themselves to play, so they're only available for custom campaigns. I think the sound design is simple but effective. It helps to not complicate things too much, and you could probably tell most of what's going on if your eyes closed. Most sound effects in the game have a few alternate sounds, which is a really cool way to add sound depth to a game with much less effort. Graphically, the game kind of falls apart when you zoom in too much, but every unit and design is distinct, which helps to differentiate units apart at a glance. Again, 2003. Lots of games use all these ugly gray and brown washed out colors, but there's plenty of variety in Wesnoth. There are some add-on campaigns that have some absolutely stunning visuals and units, but I will say that my eyes do kind of bleed when they overuse lava or ice tiles, which can be a problem. Gameplay-wise, if you're into XCOM-type RNG shenanigans, you might like Wesnoth. Emphasis on might. I will absolutely say that the game is a bit hard to get into. It's aged quite a bit, and not super clear on what does what until you've played a bit. Ranged attacks and melee attacks are more like alternate melee styles that can only be countered by themselves, rather than ranged attacks being actually ranged, though there is a mod for that. It's a bit confusing, I know, but knowing the distinction is important. Archers using their ranged attacks can't be countered by melee units that don't have one, but once they get attacked in return, they will use their weaker melee to counterattack that attack with, and not their stronger ranged attack, so keep that in mind. And before we get into the meat of the gameplay, I'm going to show you something I think is really cool. Did you see that? Units don't have to use their entire actions at once. What this means is that the strategic depth of this game has now skyrocketed. Units can cycle in and out of the front line instead of just one or the other. And you could do some really goofy stuff with this, like moving your frontliner to attack with a different unit and then finishing them off with the first unit, because units that die don't counterattack. Very important if the second unit has a ranged attack and the first one doesn't. You can also move your units that have leadership, which provides bonus damage to lower level allies in between attacks so that your entire frontline can benefit. And boy, do you need to know how to use this mechanic well. Amazing. Anyways, units have a variety of stats to keep track of, which are mostly self-explanatory. Most factions give 2 traits at random upon unit creation, which can alter those stats. Some traits are better or worse, depending on the unit. For example, quick on doors with their lower movement speed is more significant than on a faster unit like cavalry. Some traits like dexterous or strong, on the other hand, give +1 base damage to ranged and melee attacks respectively, so they're valuable on units that strike the amount of attacks more. And if you don't want to worry about traits at all, you can always just play the undead faction. Due to the fact that most units have 5 movement points as a baseline, quick is generally my favorite trait, because going from a 5 movement to 6 movement is extremely significant. As for why, if a terrain costs 2 movement to cross, your unit can now move 3 tiles instead of 2. Or if it costs 3 movement, 2 tiles instead of only 1, which is a functional increase of 50% and 100% despite only being an actual increase of 20%. This is why you stay in school, kids. You can play games better. And that extra tile could be the difference between landing on a better or worse terrain tile, which leads me to defense. Defense is actually your evasion stat, and each terrain tile has a defense value for that unit type. Tiles can contain multiple terrain types, and your units use whichever terrain has higher defense between them. Defense is not to be confused with resistances, which can increase or decrease damage taken from a damage type. Every attack in this game has a damage type, with a little icon here to tell you at a glance. You can also hover your attacks to see how much damage they'll do against every unit on the field, which is very handy. Bow or spear attacks tend to be pierce damage and good against flyer/cavalry, but pretty garbage against undead because, they don't have any flesh to pierce. In contrast, footpads have slings that deal impact damage, and mages can deal fire or arcane damage, which are all much better against them. This leads to a lot of counterplay with unit types, which, if you take note of, will make your life significantly easier when playing. And you can check resistances at a glance by hovering the HP or looking in the unit description. For multiplayer, there is a wide assortment of options to choose from, so you can adjust the game how you want, anything from turn timers to how much funding villages give, so feel free to experiment a bit. And while we're on the topic, in Battle for Wesnoth, units aren't built from a production structure in the traditional sense. You need to have a leader unit on a keep tile, who can then recruit units to connected fort tiles, as long as you have the money for them. Every unit can capture villages and have similar costs, so if you're coming from Advanced Wars, everyone is infantry. You're welcome. It doesn't have to be your starting keep either. You can recruit units from your opponents or any other keep, assuming your leader makes it there alive, because if they die, you lose the game. For campaigns, which is the main way to play, you preserve your units from previous levels and can then recall them on the next level, in the same way you might recruit a new one for a flat 20 gold price, unless otherwise adjusted. This makes recalling level 2 or higher units much cheaper than recruiting new ones, especially considering most levels don't let you recruit higher than level 1 units. In some cases, campaigns will outright prevent you from recruiting or recalling new units at all, or give new ones entirely, if the story calls for it, making unit preservation quite valuable. And while we're on the topic, the Battle for Wesnoth has a pretty cool unit promotion system if you ask me. It features a more middle-of-the-road approach between Wars-like and Fire Emblem. Units engaged in combat gain as much experience as the unit they're fighting has levels, and gain 8 experience per level of enemy if they defeat it. Units often get multiple options when they hit their XP cap to level up, turning them into a new unit entirely, with significant benefits. For example, in the Loyalist faction, which is human-based, the core unit is the Spearman, which has a melee pierce attack and a single-hit ranged javelin attack, which is better than nothing against ranged assailants, I suppose, but not by much. When they hit their XP cap, however, they have 3 options to choose from. Pikemen have more HP, damage, and gain pierce resistance, but lose their range attack. Swordsmen change their melee attack type to Blade, and also increase their amount of strikes to 4, with more resistance to Blade and impact damage. And Javelineers, which don't have a level 3 promotion like the other 2 in the base game, gain a much stronger ranged javelin attack on top of an overall stat increase, so that they're more well-rounded of a unit. Each promotion has a time and place, so if you know you're going to be facing a lot of drakes in your campaign, Javelineers or Pikemen with their stronger pierce attacks become more valuable, whereas if you're fighting undead, Swordsmen having blade damage works a little bit better against Mr. Skeletal, though not by much. Units also fully heal when leveling up, which can be its own tactical advantage if a defensive line is about to break. There's also level 0 units like peasants or walking corpses that don't have a zone of control, which is another gameplay mechanic where units can only walk one space near an enemy, unless that unit has an ability, which is another mechanic, mind you, called Skirmisher. There's a lot going on here, but just play the game a bit, you'll figure it out, I believe in you. Maybe. Now, what you probably won't figure out is what campaign difficulty does. The answer, whatever the heck the creator wants it to. There's not even a naming convention for difficulty levels, so they could be named Vanilla, Chocolate, Strawberry, and be easy, medium, and hard for all you know. Most of the mainline campaigns only have difficulty affect things like base income, starting gold, or enemy recruitment lists. Occasionally it might affect some boss unit stats, but not too often. And, potentially most importantly, each unit has an alignment type. And to explain that, I need to explain this game's day and night cycle. Normally, it's a 6-day sequence, but it can be changed on a map-by-map basis. For example, in Under the Burning Suns, the last campaign in the timeline, there's multiple days and nights for reasons. Far be it from me to spoil 23-year-old media for you. Bet you'll never guess what happens in Finding Nemo. During daylight, lawful alignment units gain a 25% damage increase, and chaotic alignment units lose 25%, and vice versa during night. Neutral units, like dwarves and elves, don't suffer any modifiers from the cycle, making them more reliable, and there's even a trait called Fearless that removes the 25% decrease. This day-night cycle adds an extra strategic layer to the TBS formula, where you have to time your attacks for when you're strongest and prepare to defend when you're weakest, adding an ebb and flow to the combat, which is pretty cool. Between day and night, there is a dawn and dusk, where the majority of units don't get any bonuses or malices. When you're in a cave, however, it's always nighttime, though occasionally there will be light tiles that make it as if it is dawn or dusk. Keep in mind, the modifier applied is based on the attacker's position, not the defender's. If mages promote to mages of light at level 3, they have an ability called Illuminate, which brightens tiles around them, making them invaluable for lawful armies. Thankfully, the fog in this game isn't obnoxious. There are actually two different types of fog in this game. One is Shroud, which lifts as you reveal it and stays that way, Red Alert 2 style. The other is Fog of War, which behaves more like Days of Ruins fog if you're coming from Advanced Wars, revealing for a turn then hiding things again when you end it. They can even be combined together for maximum annoyance. Units have as much vision as movement +1, so units will have less vision on difficult terrain, making scouts and flyers great in Fog of War. Most units can't hide in forests like Advanced Wars, though there are some units like Fugitives or Elvish Rangers that can hide in villages or forests respectively. And finally, the modding scene is great, and if you know how to code a bit, you could even make your own maps, factions, campaigns, even new mechanics entirely. The add-on menu defaults to the Wesnoth server, though I'm sure you could set up your own server online if your own add-ons. Battle for Wesnoth has a built-in mod manager that works fairly well and will helpfully remind, but not force, very important, you to update. I will add a disclaimer here that the modding scene is an absolute toss-up, especially some of the modded campaign difficulty levels. Some of them are, we'll say brutal, Genesis, like 5 times enemy income and units kind of brutal. When searching for add-ons, the community naming conventions are usually followed pretty well by mod makers, and you can sort the add-on manager at the top. Eras tend to be anything that adds or adjusts units and factions, if you're confused, and the rest of them, like resources, music, scenarios, and campaigns, are pretty self-explanatory. As for narratives, some campaigns are quite good gameplay-wise, but their stories are, I'll say, interesting. Others have a remarkable story, but overstay their welcome quite a bit, which, honestly, a lot of the regular campaigns fall into. Some campaigns have multiple stories, and you faction swap halfway through unexpectedly, or regain those units later on if the narrative calls for it. There is, technically, an overarching narrative in the official campaigns that leads from Haldric the Great's migration across the ocean to found Wesnoth, all the way to the future after quite literally an apocalypse of hubris in Under the Burning Suns. Each campaign tends to have its own self-contained narrative, though there are a few characters that make several recurring appearances, most notably Kalen's and Delphador. Campaigns usually follow a main character and faction and typically span a dozen levels, though some add-on campaigns get incredibly involved, especially those that add new factions entirely. That's not to say there's not faction mixing in the official campaigns. Humans, dwarves, and elves tend to mix quite frequently, and oftentimes you'll get a special recruit, usually as a bonus objective reward, or as a hero unit, which will accompany you. Since the core game revolves around campaigns, there's incentive to spread out your experience to more units, in order to recall them later for harder levels. Most levels also preserve a portion of your gold for the next one and feature early finish bonuses to get even more, which is based on how many villages you've captured and held, so playing well provides more and more benefits going forward. A lot of levels want you to just survive, but will give you that early finish bonus if you manage to defeat the enemy leader, and I think that's really neat. That's not to say it's without its flaws. If you barely finish a level, for example, you might see you've gone into negative gold, which also gets carried over and can lead to cascading failure 3 levels later if the minimum start gold of a level isn't enough. If there's one thing I can say about Battle for Wesnoth, it's that I really like their story-based approach and provide objectives to move the plot along rather than the other way around. Sometimes you hold out in a castle to evacuate citizens until the time limit, and other times you have to escort your hero unit to the end of a dangerous pass, and the level designs reflect this. One of the coolest examples is in the Scepter of Fire campaign, where you have to simultaneously hold off a horde of elves at the main gate while attacking trolls in the cave with you where they're strongest. You have to balance defense and offense so that 6 units can reach various ruins scattered throughout the cave map in order to close the gate off. And that's awesome. Turn-based strategy devs, take notes. Some campaigns even have branching paths that lead to entirely different routes and threats. They might even change what recruits you'll have going forward, or make veterans of your army leave you based on your choice. And I'm not kidding about that wiki. Some of these creators have their entire campaign dialogue, stories, lore, or where they take place within the greater Wesnoth storyline on it. It's a very connected, open source project between everyone, and that's something you don't see too often. As for fixes, there's really not much to say here. This game's been in development for nearly 2.5 decades. Most bugs were squashed a decade or more ago. The only issues I tend to have are in modded campaigns, which is not bound for Wesnoth proper, and thus not relevant here. They have an experimental branch so that you can play with the latest changes, and a stable branch, which is the default installation of the game, even on Steam, which it wasn't always on, by the way, so you'll probably have to add an extra 200 hours to my playtime here. Also, they have ports to mobile devices, though unless they changed it in the last decade, the Android version kinda sucked, because your touches were basically mouse clicks. But I thought the iOS version was solid before I swapped to Android way back in the 10s, old guy that I am. More recommendations, you could probably find a mod within a minute that'll add or fix whatever you're worried about, or make it yourself. Personally, I think the base game's accuracy-based system is complete dog shit, because it feels really bad having your 70% attack miss 4 times and their 30% attack hit 3 times, especially if it was the corner point of your entire strategy. Worse if you lost one of your favorite units because of it. But I will say there is a handy-dandy little feature right here when you start a campaign called Biased RNG that fixes all that. You're welcome. Sure, it gets rid of some variance, and sometimes you really need to trust a unit to dodge 10 attacks in a row, but I would argue you probably already failed before that point. Time to head back to battle training. My biggest gripe, however, and I cannot stress this enough, is that the flagship campaign, Heir to the Throne, kinda sucks. Sure, for its time it was fine, and I'm nitpicking here, but that just means I care. This campaign is all over the place. The narrative is plain as heck, there's not much memorable dialogue, and the level design could use some work. Some levels are very easy, especially the last one, since they give you a level 2 recruit that will wipe the floor with every army due to the terrain, and others are a bit harder, especially the first level if you're brand new to the game. I like the choices you get between the thieves opening a flanking route, or helping you take a Lensifar, or choosing to go over the mountains to fight orcs instead of undead, or fighting on a boat versus along the coast. Heck, I even like this little sea orc guy here in the middle of this level, but the design is just not that good overall. This is a novice campaign, which people will be trying as one of the first campaigns they do, and it's probably not helping the player count. Now, every campaign has its flaws, and personally, I dislike Northern Rebirth a whole lot more, and I'd show you a clip of one of the last levels where there's like 5 enemy leaders sharing a massive castle on keeps and arguing with each other, but then I'd have to play through Northern Rebirth again, and I'm not doing that. Let's just pretend I can't use debug commands to get there. Other than that, there's not much else I can recommend here. It's a turn-based strategy game with lots of units with the same problems these games always have. The closeout is always going to be a slog against the AI, and obviously the game is dated, though I'm not the kind of person who minds that, some people will be. However, I do think the Battle for Wesnoth does a pretty good job at avoiding stalemates with the day-night cycle rewarding timely aggression, terrain having significant advantages or disadvantages, and the inclusion of range versus melee attacks so that you can whittle down front lines for a significant turn. Overall though, this game does practically everything right in a turn-based strategy game. It's a simple enough premise with great execution. I can't speak for how the game was when it released, though I did find some absolutely goofy RuneScape Classic looking visuals from back then. Enjoy. Sound-wise, the music fits nicely in the background, and the variable unit sounds add a lot of depth despite weapon classes sounding the same between factions. Graphically, it gets the point across, but is definitely aged, though you can tell units apart at a glance, which is the important bit. But we really gotta tone down the lava nice tiles, okay guys? Gameplay-wise, as long as you turn on the biased RNG, I have no complaints, though I will tell you I usually play with Doogie's Legend of the Invincibles add-on for most campaigns these days, because I just like playing with the level 4 units and an item system. It just makes every unit a bit more special, and I like that. Feel free to disagree. And while I didn't bring it up earlier, this game's quality of life is phenomenal. You can accelerate units up to 16 times speed, or just skip animations entirely, though I think 3 times is the sweet spot for understanding what's going on and still being playable. The autosave feature in this game is surprisingly functional. You can easily access this menu up here in the top left to redo any turn within seconds if you're a save scummer, or want to rethink your strategy. It's legitimately one of the best features of this game, the genre, and every turn-based strategy needs to have both these features in my opinion going forward. I thoroughly enjoy this game, and if you want a few campaigns to check out, Anything in the Dragon Trilogy by Rzaney, including the prequel, tend to be pretty good, though they're quite large-scale battles, so keep that in mind. To Lands Unknown is a really cool modded campaign with a new faction to get your feet wet, and Legend of the Invincibles is fun gameplay-wise, but the story and dialogue, exist, but you'll get your power fantasy from it, which, is the important bit, and Genesis will kick your ass, and will probably be unfinished because the creator got bullied and busy, which is a shame. But honestly, anything above 2K downloads is probably going to be competent, and part of the fun is gambling whether it'll be fun or not, which you can usually figure out within a level. The Battle for Wesnoth is an excellent time waster that is completely free, so 100% worth it to at least try out if you like turn-based strategy. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. And now that you've made it to the end of another video, here's another fun fact for you. Laser, pew pew space lasers. It's actually an acronym that stands for Light Amplification by Stimulated Emission of Radiation. And I will see you guys in the next one. Adios.